there's certainly stuff going on.
Is that the modern way of calling to order, as the microphones are on?
Oh, just to warn you.
Right. Anybody who's going to say anything unflattering about Josh has to wait till after the meeting.
So this means it's live on cable right now, right?
It's being recorded for
It's not broadcast.
It's not live, it's just recorded?
It's just recorded.
It's live.
Oh, it's also live.
YouTube, I think.
I'm gonna have these guys come out, so I also,
Does the town have a technology person like that?
No.
I mean, what happens if something goes wrong with the computer?
Well, we have like a company that we subcontract out with IT stuff for, but that's
And
about
Michael?
it.
Yeah?
Could you face that microphone towards our guests?
Is that gonna be-
And if possible, yeah, that can be yours, Stephen. I wonder, I'd like to put one maybe on a chair closer to.
Or they can move closer to us.
Sure, yeah,
How about that?
that works. And let me just check you two.
Leave them in our map.
Make sure we're live. And then why don't you flip yours
I rely
around?
on people, face it because of.
Oh yeah, that one's fine. And then why don't you take that one?
And the beauty is we have no idea how any of this sounds, so.
Remote, because I could adjust to be able to hear people.
Red zone is the
Okay,
first.
great.
thing.
We're live.
We could do that.
All right, I'm gonna call this meeting to order.
Oh, I already.
I'm gonna call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Why don't we start by just going around and introducing ourselves, starting with Michael on the left.
Michael Kozowski, wireless consultants of organizations.
Stephen Coltai, Gadfly.
Dave Perkins, also a gadfly.
Josh Beardson, I'm the chair of the committee and on the select board.
Jordan Barnett Parker, I'm the vice chair, also a select board member.
I'm Cheryl Nevius, just a Lincolnville resident.
I'm Arlene Jurowitz-Wayton. I'm a Lincolnville resident and new to the committee.
Jim McKenna, I'm an Appleton resident, husband and father, and now a grandfather. Congratulations. Thank you.
Andrew Weeks, live in Rockport, and I'm the operations leader for Resound Networks. Great, grew up in Portland.
Oh, I founded Resound Networks. They still let me work there.
So we have public comment next. There's no one here from the public, so we can move on from that. Dave, why don't you turn around that microphone for yourself? All the way to you. He's got one right there. Oh, I guess. Yeah, and Michael, why don't you turn that one towards you?
That was the best thing.
This they're not that sensitive, so I want to make sure we capture everyone.
We can move on to the meeting too.
Okay, great. Why don't you two share with us what you want to share?
All right, I'll keep floating up here. I'm going to take these off, these masks, and we're all ready to get through this chapter of our lives. Thank you for hosting us tonight. I know some of you I've known for a long time, and some of you I've met your acquaintance just recently. And I think first and foremost know that we are your neighbors. I lived in Appleton for the last 20 years, and lives in Rockport. And you've been in the
I've been up
intros.
here 15 years,
Yeah.
grew up in Portland.
And the information that we pulled together tonight is really just discussion for discussion purposes. If we can help educate and inform, I've spent 27 years in telecommunications. So my experience in telecom predates my time here in the state of Maine. I've laid as much fiber over the years as I've built wireless, in fact probably a lot more fiber. So I can talk to both. I can talk cable as well. I work for a cable company. I understand, your broadband, the current, state of affairs with broadband, I live in Appleton, we have, to my knowledge, 100% fiber coverage from the same company, LCI, Lincolnville Telephone, Tidewater. And, I understand that it's expensive, and I understand that, in spite of the fact that it is fiber service, for whatever reason, it's limited to only 100 megabits per second. So I think there are opportunities to drive down costs through competition and to provide a very cost-effective overlay service in the community of Lincolnville. So, a one-time investment that blankets the entire community, obviously being a wireless company, we'd be proposing, a wireless network that has speeds that are comparable to fiber optics, with latency that is only limited by the fiber because latency is lowest with wireless technology. That's why financial institutions choose wireless. And this is a message that we've been delivering around the state. For some communities, it goes rapidly to a proposal. You'll see in these discussion materials, Andrew and I were talking to 3 towns in the Katahdin region last week. They're in a similar situation in that they are almost 100% cabled, 100% served by cable companies that can provide service of at least 100 megabits per second. But they too are dissatisfied. It's a real common theme. Either residents and businesses feel like they're not getting what they're paying for, or they're paying too much, or both. So let me jump into this, and we'll try to move through it pretty quickly. Feel free to stop.
Just to start, so when you speak of speeds, are we talking about a symmetrical connection? Okay, I just wanna make sure when we discuss download that we're also.
I don't think, and for most people, it's a matter of opinion. For most people, there's not a lot of utility for a symmetrical connection. Average, if you look at actual usage on fiber networks and cable networks, the ratio is 14:1 today.
Yeah.
And it's not closing, it's actually expanding, because people principally use their service for download. That's not to say that filmmakers and some others might need that upload, but most people don't. So, but we would offer it.
I'm one of the rare few people who do need a
Who do need, yeah,
large amount of
yeah.
upload here.
And so, it needs to be available, it needs to be an option. So we'll walk through this. Andrew will talk to some parts of it, fill in some gaps. Please feel free to stop us at any time. We really just want this to be a casual, neighborly discussion. This is a company that I founded 14 years ago and have grown it now statewide. And if anything, I'd just like to be a resource. If we can be a solution, that's great. If not, we can at least help to educate and inform. So agenda, we'll talk about the evolution of wireless broadband, and then some background info on Red Zone, a rationale for fixed wireless, why this is, I think, the technology of the future, why I believe wireless is the end game. Some headlines that will capture your attention. FWA stands for Fixed Wireless Access. That's another name for home wireless broadband. Our technology approach, our recent pilot of some incredibly new game-changing technology from a company called Toronto Wireless. Lincolnville's predicted coverage, a propagation analysis example. This is a more detailed, sort of a digitized look at wireless coverage in another region where we've done a deep dive. And then some repeater solutions if we need to fill in any gaps. And then lastly, we'll look at Connect Maine, the new Maine Connectivity Authority, who qualifies for funding and how Red Zone with its services would qualify for those infrastructure grants. So, first slide, you can see the evolution of wireless in mobility. You know, most of us, well, some of us here are old enough to remember a bag phone, right? It wasn't, when you look at this timeline, it wasn't until 2007 that Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone. And that's really when we started needing broadband, not only at home, but while we were away, right? It just became a part of our daily life almost 24/7. Now here you are, fast forward 13, 14 years later, and every kid in grade school seems to have an iPhone. We're connected all the time, right? And we're connected by wireless. And, you know, and we demand that it operates 24/7, so it's exceedingly reliable. If you flip the page and you look at wireless inside the home, it's a similar trajectory. We were introduced to Wi-Fi in 1999, only 21 years ago. Speeds of 11 megabits per second, and today the new Wi-Fi 6 standard boasts speeds of 9.6 gigabits per second. It operates in the same bands as it did then. We just get more spectral efficiency, more bits per hertz. The technology just keeps improving. And you can see these trajectories for both mobility and in-home Wi-Fi, right? If you follow that trajectory, you can see that, you know, you have parity or performance that exceeds fiber to the home. And you think about that for a minute. If you could get the same performance as a wire, but you didn't have to put up utility poles and have wires, would you put up utility poles and wires? For most people, the answer is no, right? But you need to be convinced that it's going to perform the way you want it to. So some background on Redzone. It's a company that I founded 14 years ago after working for many years in telecom, building fiber optic networks in metro areas. I built about 300 miles in Memphis, Tennessee, working for Time Warner Cable, and then moved to Atlanta, Georgia, built a 100-mile fiber ring around the city of Atlanta. Subsequently built fiber rings in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Birmingham. Started a company, raised a bunch of private equity, house on Appleton Ridge. And after a couple of years, decided that the way to better broadband was to use my experience to start my own company. So I did. Today, to my knowledge, Redzone is the only Maine-owned and operated ISP that operates in all 16 counties in the state. We serve thousands of customers statewide, and we enjoy one of the best Google review scores of any ISP in the state. You'll find a lot of ISPs will hide their Google review scores. This is a very difficult business. We like to say that the worst internet provider is the one that you have. And that's eating a little bit of humble pie, right? Say, look, this is a tough business for anybody that's in it. We're happy with our Google review scores, but we're always striving to get better, right? There's been some tough love over the years, and we try to learn and we try to grow from it. There's always room for improvement. But we have, again, thousands of happy customers statewide. And our solution is simple. Think of us as wireless. These are all actual towers that we've lit in the state and we currently operate. But we're really a hybrid solution. Of these 72 towers, half of them have fiber connections. And the other half have microwave backhaul to the fiber. Oddly enough, when we have outages, they're almost always due to the cable going down. And that's because, of course, cable, whether it's power, right? CMP had a bunch of outages. My house was out last night since midnight. Every inch as that fiber or power goes down the road is a potential point of failure, right? Whereas, let's say we put up four towers to blanket Lincolnville, there are only four points of failure in that network. So wireless tends to be exceedingly reliable. And if you Next page. So I might have gotten a little bit ahead of myself, but I think these are just some points about why fixed wireless, I think, is an end game solution for broadband. Number one, it's the most cost effective. It's about 80% less than running wires to homes in capital costs, and about 50% less than fiber to the home network to operate. It's the most reliable broadband infrastructure, hands down. I've built both, and I can tell you that when I put up the first 5 miles of fiber in Atlanta, Georgia, it's right at the end of Tornado Alley, southern Atlanta, and a tornado took down the entire network. When we completed the network, the day it was completed, we turned to the first customer, some joker put a bullet hole through the fiber in the aerial section of it. You know, with wireless infrastructure, you have fewer points of failure, and you can put emergency diesel generators at every one of your towers. So you're not entirely dependent on the electric utility. And not to batter and bruise Central Maine Power, but they are the least reliable power grid in the United States. Statistically speaking, the most frequent number of outages and the longest average duration outage. And I'm sorry if, I actually have great respect for people who work for the electric utility. It's a tough, tough job, especially in the state of Maine, but that's just a fact. Fixed wireless closes the digital divide the fastest. So look, if you were to place an order with Corning today for fiber, it's an 81-week lead time. The soonest you would get your fiber is roughly July or August of 2023. And they will only guarantee pricing for 90 days, so you won't know what that fiber will cost until maybe May of 2023. That's best case. Now hopefully those supply chain issues are getting solved, because the United States is trying to solve its broadband issues in rural America. But right now, those supply chain issues are making it look like it could be until 2024, 2025 before rural America gets the broadband that it deserves. And it's an opportunity, I think, for fixed wireless to shine, for fixed wireless to prove itself as a viable alternative to running wires to houses. So we think we can make service available in a community like yours. We say 9 months, probably more like 6 months. We've built, as many as 38 towers in a year. Standing up 4 towers inside of 6 months is not a challenge. Fixed wireless is future-proof. Let me tell you what I mean by future-proof. No technology is future-proof. I'm a technologist. I have a degree in electrical engineering from the United States Naval Academy, and I was the chief engineer on a nuclear submarine, naval officer. I understand this technology, I understand fiber technology as well. And no technology is future-proof. Anybody that tells you that is lying. We could be talking with muons or some other quantum particles 10 years from now. And that's a good thing, that's exciting. But we've got to be careful about the size of the investments we make today in any infrastructure, because we may end up replacing it inside of 10 years. Something to think about. But why is wireless future-proof then? It's future-proof because, unlike a wired solution, which only runs down the road and connects to certain structures, a wireless solution provides connectivity over everything that it covers. So what I like to say is, with a one-time investment in wireless, you're providing connectivity for every present and every future structure in the community. And it's really cost efficient in that way. And in a community like Lincolnville, there are still a lot of rural areas that could end up being new housing developments, and to extend their plant has been cost prohibitive. We can't get ourselves in that situation again, right? So let's do something wireless where the service will be there as soon as you build the structure. Put a radio up, and they're all on. So, look, this, in summary, highest reliability, lowest latency, fastest deployment, most affordable, and future-proof. These headlines, the next slide, are really, really interesting. And we can send you this as a PDF after when you click on these links. These are recent headlines, like within the last week. The first one, this is Verizon's chief financial officer saying that fixed wireless, that means home broadband wireless, is the killer app for 5G and is driving Verizon's nationwide broadband strategy. And I'll just read it. By the end of 2025, Verizon intends to make broadband available to close to 70 million locations, including its eastern seaboard Fios footprint. Now think about that for a minute. Why would they put wireless home broadband atop their fiber footprint? Either the fiber is tapped out, or operating a wired network is so expensive, right, that to continue to get the margins and the operating efficiencies, you need a different infrastructure. Wireless is more cost effective. Fixed wireless will serve just over 70% of those Fios locations. And it's really something to think about. For T-Mobile, same story. As of April, the company had made the 5G version of its fixed wireless home internet service available to 30 million households. Neville Ray is their CTO. The company expects to have 500,000 customers by the end of this year, and within 4 years, the company expects to have 8 million to 9 million customers. And they're taking customers from cable. And then this last one, these are friends of ours in Texas. This company, Resound Networks, was the, fifth or sixth largest RDOF, or Rural Development Opportunity Fund winner. They won $311 million this time last year to connect 210,000 households across 7 states. They're using the same technology that we're now deploying to run wireless. And their CEO, Tyson Curtis, this press release was just last Friday. They're seeing speeds of 1 gigabit per second downstream per customer over distances of 5 miles. If you read the press release, they're also getting upstream speeds of 500 megabits per second. So the next slide, what is a technology approach? Well, our solution again is hybrid, fiber and wireless. There's a place for both. I think fiber should be in the middle mile, connecting the towers. So our solution extends the reach of 10 gigabit per second fiber that already exists at hundreds of towers in Maine to homes and businesses in our communities. So the wireless is the bridge from the tower to the home. This hybrid fiber wireless approach is the fastest and most affordable way to close Maine's digital divide. And you can see, here's our solution now. We put up 4 sectors of radios on the tower. So if you can envision a tower with 4 radios at the top, each one of those radios has a 90-degree pie slice. So 4 of them covers 360 degrees. And each has capacity of 2.5 gigabits per second. So 10 gigabits per second. 10 gigabits per second of fiber at the base of the tower, connected right into 10 gig ports on each of those radios, distributing 10 gig of capacity to the surrounding homes. We can support 1,000 clients on a tower. And that's today. With a software upgrade, which I have here listed as 6 to 12 months. But we think it's going to be any day now, probably by the end of the year. 2.4 gig per sector will go to 3.2 gig per sector. And we have 500 by 100 meg per client. You can see that Resound has already tested this to a gig. We put this in here conservatively because that's what we're comfortable offering, 500 by 100. Within 6 to 12 months, or maybe by the end of the year, 500 by 250. And within 24 months, 1 gig. Right now, I have a copy of the roadmap. Within 24 months, they're aiming at 1.6 gigabits per second per client. There's some really unique intellectual property that this company, Toronto Wireless, has. For the last 10 years, they've been a research and development shop. Over $300 million invested. One of the board members of the company, he's the former CEO of Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, has a summer house here in Maine. Go figure, right? And he found me after he presented Toronto to the Connect Maine Authority over the summer, and it kind of fell on uninterested ears. And he found his way to me, and what he told me was almost too good to be true. I dismissed it entirely, and I handed him off to my manager of network engineering. And my network manager said, "Jim, you need to listen to this. This is like nothing you've ever seen before." And so I got engaged in the conversation. And these guys essentially took two standards, right? LTE and 5G, which is what we call the 3GPP standard, which is built for mobility. And it really isn't ideal for fixed wireless home broadband. And they took the Wi-Fi standard, which is built for in-home broadband. And they said, neither of these work. Neither of these are ideal. We need to start from scratch. And so they did. They built their own silicon, their own digital signal processors, and they created a product that is like nothing else in the market. And they have probably a 3-year jump right now on anybody else in terms of IP. The most significant, I listed a few of them here. One is advanced beamforming. So for years now, for a few years, carriers have, if you have a sector on a tower communicating to whether they're handheld devices or homes, you can electronically steer the beams in order to enhance the signal to one house or to one handset and suppress the signal to others, right? By enhancing the signal, you improve the signal to noise ratio, you improve the power, right? You improve the modulation rate and the speed, right? What they're doing, what Toronto's doing, is they're putting beamforming on both ends of the link. So at the client location, the house, you don't have to aim the radio directly to the tower. It's probably good if you do, but if you don't, the radio is going to be, the beams are going to steer electronically. And again, it's going to enhance the beam to the tower and suppress all of the other beams. So you're getting true symmetrical performance. So what I've listed here, this 500 by 250, that's just a framing mechanism. They certainly can offer full symmetric service today. There's just not a demand for it for most applications, like I said before. Proprietary interference rejection. One of the things we've struggled with in the world of wireless is one tower interferes with the next tower. If you build them too close together, the network just, it fails at scale because you have all this crosstalk, right? All this self-interference. Toronto is the first technology that we've seen that offers true what we call frequency reuse of one capability. I can use the same 80 megahertz channel, and that's how wide the channel widths are on the tower, on every single sector, on the same tower, and on every adjacent tower. And what that means is that I'm not prevented from adding capacity in my network as I scale to reach more households. It's not going to all fall apart like a house of cards. And with Wi-Fi technologies and with mobile technologies, that has historically been the case. There's some other things here, isolating bits first. And part of that frequency reuse comes from a proprietary noise cancellation technique. Toronto would tell you that their digital signal processors that they build are the equivalent of 250 off-the-shelf digital signal processors. They do 2.5 million interference cancellations a second. I know I sound like I'm making a sales pitch for Toronto, and in part I am, because they're a partner of ours. You know, I being a technologist myself, I'm not easily wowed by any technology. This is one of those rare occasions where I can look you in the eye and say, this is game changing, and we need to stand up and take note. So compared to where we're at today, this is 12 times the capacity of Red Zone's current LTE solution on a per sector basis, and 20 times current speed to end users. Markedly different, huge, tremendous capability. We tested this pretty exhaustively in Rockland. There are things though that we did test and things we didn't. You know, I didn't invent the technology in my basement, so I didn't have to prove it out. You know, it was already approved by the FCC, and there are a number of other providers, both in the U.S. and around the world, that have been testing it and deploying it for a period of time. And I actually went and visited one of those companies. We tested from 60 different locations. You can see a table here summarizing performance to a number of them. Just to understand, the frame rate on these particular radios was set to max out at 650 down and about 130, 140 up. So we didn't have the new frame rate capability that I mentioned that would give you the 500 by 250. Toronto could also deploy, could give us a frame rate of 500 by 500 and eventually a gig by a gig. But the only drawback to that is you would have to put the entire network in a full symmetrical format, so everybody would get, you know, let's say 500 by 500. Because traffic usage patterns are so heavily skewed in the download, we would probably favor more of an 80-20 download in most cases. That's what public demands.
Jim, if I could just add to, you know, he said it earlier a few slides ago about, you know, not leaving it, passing it on, and, you know, I'm in that same school of thought, and no, I did not have a technology background like Jim. I was a 18-year MBA Bank of America guy up here in the Mid-Coast. But knowing that the team we have in Rockland was essentially trying to break this, disprove it, getting behind a metal building and behind a dumpster at 6 feet to prove that it just doesn't do what it says it does, we couldn't break it. I mean, I'm smiling underneath my mask here, but it really is something that all of us, when Jim presented it to me in my office, I was like, I'll believe when I see it. You can't have that kind of speed and that kind of capacity and then say, well, of course you could if it's line of sight, it's clear. So our team deliberately over those 60 tests was like, no, we're gonna do this behind this all metal roof, you know, shed building and see what happens. And we'll set it up on top of the dumpster while we're at it, and still was just blown away at the performance of this.
So I mentioned friends in Texas at Resound Networks, and you saw the press release for the performance they're getting out of Toronto. You know, they're committing hundreds of millions of dollars to meet their RDOF obligations. And Tyson Curtis, their CEO, stated that they expect to deploy this technology in places where they thought they would have to deploy fiber to reach gigabit speeds. I have another friend in Nathan Stook in St. Louis has a company like Red Zone called Whisper ISP. Whisper was the second largest Connect America Fund winner in 2018. They won $220 million to connect about 80,000 households across 6 states. And they're meeting 100%. Their current plan is to meet 100% of their rural CAF obligations to these households with Toronto. They're building like 10 towers a day. They'll have over 1,000 towers And they already had, a number of, over 100 customers in some sectors, and they invited me to come check it out firsthand. And I did. We drove around the St. Louis area, and I was impressed with the customer testimonials. I was impressed with what their technicians had to say. It's one thing to test it here in Rockland, it's another thing to see a live network carrying live traffic. And, it validated everything I saw. Then I also traveled to Santa Clara for Toronto's official unveiling of their technology. This was early October, and I got to see some demos and hear from Chief Technologist at British Telecom, Chief Technology Officer at MTN Supersonic in South Africa. And the thing that they spoke of Toronto exceedingly, they just gave it a lot of praise, but the Chief Technology Officer at MTN Supersonic said, we have a pretty vast fiber network today. We've already grown, in the last year we've grown Toronto to 150 towers. We're so gangbusters about this that we expect to have 400 towers lit inside of the next 12 months. And with that 400 towers, it will provide greater coverage than all of our fiber network built to date. So, interesting story. Let's bring the conversation back to Lincolnville, and I'm going to hand it over to Andrew for the next few slides.
Sure. So again, thank you everybody. It's great to meet you and be here this evening. And Michael over here certainly can recognize some of this imagery. So thank you, Michael. But one of the great things that I take tremendous pleasure in our job, in our company, is having the opportunity to review maps and coverage with Jim and talk about what opportunities we could create or what level of education we could provide in this wireless space. And I think Jim uses a great reference for anyone based on their technology backgrounds or lack thereof. Just take a flashlight and bend it down and shoot it on the ground. What that shows really is a rough imagery of really what this wireless technology can do, as he talks about it being future-proof. And someone wants to put in a dirt road, a couple houses down it. Well, that flashlight's been shining on it for X amount of months already. It'll be covered. And I want you to think about that as we look at this imagery. So what you have here is our best data having E911 data, which would be location data. So you can talk about populations, but really for what matters to us is we need to know locations. Okay, it's important that we can provide coverage where there are dots, and I'll be the first to admit, and it can be sometimes frustrating, but we'll talk about repeater opportunities later. I was not successful in being able to cover every single dot. All right, and I also know that in the event that we were to enter into an agreement of some sort, it would be foolish for me to think that I'd get 100% of everybody in the community to sign up with us. It would be great, but it would never happen, but it would be great. What I've provided here is a predicted propagation that would show what the coverage could be for the borders of Lincolnville town, how many total towers, how many sectors, as Jim referred to earlier, as they're essentially 90-degree slices of pizza, right? You get 4 of them that have full 360 on a tower, and really where they'd be coming from. So I apologize, I don't have some directional arrows here, and I do have my laptop in the event that someone does want me to bust it and we can show this live. But Hatchet Mountain we are currently co-locating on. You can see that on the top left, I've mentioned a tower near Route 1 in Lincolnville for SBA Monroe, and 2 U.S. cellular sites. And I do just want to make mention that we take tremendous pride in our co-location options and who we choose to co-locate with. So whether it's Crown Castle, if not the largest, one of the largest tower companies, American Tower, U.S. Cellular. We've got great relationships with these companies, and we're honored to be able to do business with them. In the past, we have had handshake deals we might co-locate on someone's barn or someone that has a structure, and it can be very helpful, and it's very, very generous, and it's very much the main way. But I can't get that guarantee that when they're working on their kitchen, they don't turn the power off when a master electrician comes, and then they take down maybe people down the leg of their connection. Right, so in the form of a repeater and talking about someone that could do that for us, we are open to options, but we would really be more in a commercial carrier grade solution first. So really, when we do these presentations through like a Zoom link, you know, I do this live, but for the purpose of being in person here with paper, this really shows that the SBA Monroe site, if you're not familiar with it, it's down on Route 1. It is the lowest right-hand corner, the lowest on the bottom right. That really...
The tower you see when you hike wall.
Yeah, that's right. And that really is going to favor that Route 1 coastline right there immediately. That is not, Jim Morale would be foolish to think that that's doing any sort of penetration into the downtown, right, into where we are now, right into Lincolnville Center. In the northeast, if I may say, call it that, is where you have US Cellular Northport, and you have US Cellular Northport West in the northern section. So again, my apologies for not marking these towers. And then Hatchet is in the bottom left where you see the town name Hope. You can see a little cluster of about 3 towers on a mountaintop. That is where we currently operate different technology with Red Zone today. And Jim, you've been up there probably for what? One of the
Well, it's connected to my house for the
That's right.
past 14 years.
There you go. So what we would show in an educational discussion only, you know, purposes would be that with these 4 sites in 6 sectors, we would be able to provide tremendous coverage to Lincolnville. You know, Jim mentioned earlier about the gigabit per second capacity, and so, you know, you could do the math at a 1 sector orientation. With that 1 sector would push out 2.4 gigabits per second capacity. Obviously, a 4 sector, to Jim's point earlier, would be up to 10, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, you're looking at 14.4 gigabits of per second capacity with that kind of network setup. And I'll pause there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you do the math on this, there are about 1,000 households in Lincolnville today, give or take. There's just over 2,200 population. So about 1,000 households. Let's say half of them stayed with fiber and half of them jumped ship and jumped onto this network. So 500 households. 500 households sharing 14.4 gigabits per second. Even if 10% of them were speed testing all at the same time, exact same time, they'd all get 300 megabits per second. That's how much capacity we're talking about injecting here. To put it in perspective, kind of compare it to fiber, we are one of Consolidated Communications' largest customers in the state of Maine. I just had a one-on-one with their CEO a week ago, where he was thanking us for our business, and we keep growing on their network. Most of their fiber, and they're one of the largest fiber companies in the United States. I think they're the 5th largest fiber provider in the United States today. Most of their fiber network is only 10 gig or less.
That means that all the, that's all the capacity it's feeding into their system? Is that what you mean?
If you look at any leg anywhere in the state of Maine, you're hard pressed to find fiber that has optronics on it today that can give speeds faster than 10 meg. There's some sections that are 40, but most are 10 gig or less. In fact, the places where we've asked for 10 gig, they're like, it's, you know, we can get you to a gig, maybe 2 gig. It's a whole overhaul, brand new optronics, and they want us to pay for it. And we have in some cases to get 10 gig in some remote locations. So if you think about that for a minute, I mean, a good question for your current fiber provider would be, hey, you know, we've got this network that purportedly could offer gigabit per second to every home. It is fiber. What's the capacity of the middle mile that connects it to the IP drains, right, to the web? Might only be a gig. You might have gig capacity to every house and only a gig connected to the internet. I don't know. It's a good question to ask, right? In this case, you know, 14.4 gigabits per second of capacity is future-proof type capacity. We can't think for a minute that everybody in town is going to jump ship from their current provider. And you could always, you know, you could double this capacity just by doubling the number of sectors. It's that easy.
Can I ask, along those lines though, when you say 14.4, you're also dependent on what's coming off of the towers. So you're saying you will have a guaranteed big enough pipe coming out of the tower that you'll have the 14.4?
Yeah, so.
You
it's a
won't hit
great
that
question.
1 gig that you just talked
So
about.
what we would do is, if we're to like 4 towers here, we'd likely bring fiber to 2 of them.
Mm.
So two would in essence be repeaters of the other two towers, or?
Yeah, what we would do is bridge those with 10 gig microwave. So a 10 gig microwave is, it's under 10 grand for a pair of radios, and those will run uninterrupted, I mean, for 50 years. I mean, they just don't drop a packet.
So would you somehow run fiber that's independent of what's here already? Because if it's dependent on
That's a good
what we
question.
have and the limitations of this network, if we can only have 1 gig, how do you then multiply that out to 14.2 gig?
So we may have to backhaul network here to get out to consolidated communications.
And where's,
you're-
where's that? What's the, how complicated is that to get?
Well, it's not overly complex, to build it, but,
The cost effectiveness of it.
it's not even the cost effectiveness of it. You know, we'd have to look at it and work it with them. We have, and I think I talked to you, Stephen, at one point about this. We have a tower in Liberty that we, were backhauling to Union, where we connected to fiber with a company called Tidewater LCI. That was our point of fiber connectivity.
Want to upgrade it for more fiber for our customers.
Yeah, they couldn't even get us 200 megabits per second on the fiber.
That's your backbone?
Yeah, well, it was
For
our
that
backbone
one
for that one site, and for Coggins Hill, we have a tower on Coggins Hill too.
So we got creative.
So, we
remember-
said, they actually consolidated who we bought the fiber through, and they in turn, you know, bought it from, because they didn't have fiber presence there. They said, meet us in, Jefferson. And so we backhauled, Coggins Hill and Union, to Jefferson to get to consolidated fiber, so that we could get a mere gigabit per second of fiber connectivity.
And that's through microwave.
Yeah, microwave.
And we're actually turning
We have-
up that fiber connection.
We have 40 11 gigahertz microwave connections around the state today, and several 24 gigahertz microwave links as well. We built a 2 gigabit per second link 11 miles across Frenchman's Bay for the Jackson Laboratory, because their fiber network, you know, running all the way across the causeway. If you remember, there's a lot of construction in recent memory. They had a lot of outages and they needed a backup path to get off the island. We built a gigabit alternative path, wireless path for Bernstein Shore, largest law firm in the state, a couple of years ago as well.
And those are singularly dedicated lines, so they're not being, there's no depreciation of the signal because there's just one singular user. Am I correct in thinking that?
Tower to tower.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, whereas, you know, if you had a 1 gigabit tower here, then that would be divided upon 500 households or 200 households or however many else.
Yeah, so, there's 2 forms of internet service, 2 broad categories. One is called maximum bit rate service, and the other is guaranteed bit rate service. When you think of something, an SLA, right, am I gonna guarantee you certain minimum speeds? That's what carriers buy, that's what large enterprises like Jackson Labs buy. So they own that 2 gigabits per second, right? They own the radios at both ends of the link. They couldn't afford to buy, I mean, they're a hugely cash-rich nonprofit, but they could not, they ended up buying their uplink as a guaranteed bit rate service from Consolidated Communications, and I think it's in the town of Sullivan. I think that's where the tower is. And you pay a premium. I mean, a gigabit per second of dedicated internet can cost $3,500 a month, right? By comparison, a gigabit of internet in a home is a maximum bit rate service. And you're right, it can suffer congestion because you have potentially hundreds of customers sharing a pipe. This is where we as carriers and internet providers have done a horrible job of setting proper expectations and educating the public. And the analogy here is there are no amount of lanes that you could build on 295 such that the highway authority, the turnpike authority would say you would never have a traffic jam, ever. You'll never have congestion.
Right.
We just can't make that promise. But we all need a big wide pipe, wide enough pipe anyway, to stream our shows, to conduct our business. That there has to be some kind of minimum. So this is a very complex conversation between GBR, guaranteed bit rate service, and maximum bit rate service. We need to do a better job of making sure that we give you some form of SLA so that when we build these networks, you have confidence that it's always going to reach some minimum standard.
I think to answer your question, Jordan, some of the numbers they're talking about are, yes, shared between all the subscribers. Some of them is just a way to get between two towers, and there's nobody else involved.
Well, if I'm understanding correctly, there's a source point which feeds the towers, and then from the towers that gets broadcasted out and divided among however many uses there are.
Correct.
Again. And again, this isn't meant to be contentious, but like for example, Islesboro, where they have 1, gigabit connection to each household.
They
Because
don't.
They don't?
Well, no, they have fiber. It was just like LCI has. Does LCI have 1 gigabit connections here, every household? It's the same fiber.
I honestly don't know what their ultimate capabilities are. I know what they offer, which is not 1 gigabit, but I was under the assumption when we heard from the people who built the Islesboro connections that it was gigabit to each household because they all had one singular.
So, I don't.
And again, that's not meant,
Yeah.
I'm not meaning this as it's not to be a contentious issue, but I'm just trying to.
Sure.
There are limitations, however, I understand that the capability of the fixed wireless would improve as the source of fiber that feeds it improves. So if in 5 years, instead of it being 1 gigabit, it could be 40, then the transmission power would increase exponentially along with that feed rate, correct?
Yeah, again, there's an upgrade path, correct. No matter what technology you invest in, you need to see an upgrade path, right? Because people have an insatiable appetite for broadband. But no, I mean, the network on Islesboro connects to roughly 750 homes. It's my understanding that it's fed with 2 gig. So if you do the math, take 2,000 right now, 2,000 megabits per second divided by 750. That's the speed you get if everybody speed tested at the same time.
Sorry, say that again. So if every person on the island did a speed test at the same time, and they're all sharing 2 gigs.
60,000 divided by
So their
750.
utilization, if say 100% of the households are utilizing
Yeah.
the connection at the same time, that would extrapolate out to 750 megabits per second.
No, there's 750 households.
Divide 2,000 divided by 750.
Yeah, so 2.6.
That's what they get if they all speed
Megabits.
test at the same time. 2.6 megabits per second. Does that make sense?
The mathematics of it does. I just guess I was under the impression.
No,
that
so
it was-
everyone there, my understanding is everyone has gig service. So if one person ran a speed test and no one else was doing anything, they would get their speed test would say 1 gig.
They wouldn't get 2.
But the
they get
whole,
1.
Yeah.
but the whole island is sharing it.
I must have understood it
sharing
wrong
2
when they
gigs.
presented to us, because I was under the impression that it wasn't split up like that because of the individual connections to each house.
It has to be. You literally have to have
Server.
750 gigabits per second.
Yeah, that's not possible.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, you won't find fiber in the state of Maine. Most of it's limited to 40, and most of it's limited to 10 or
Yeah.
less.
But the point being is if no one's throttled on Islesboro.
Yeah.
They
Just
all have
contingent on
access
usage
to
at
up to
one
a
time,
gig
yeah.
Correct.
if no one else is doing it.
Some are working, some are at home,
Yeah.
some are aren't at home, so it's it's normally very.
It's a statistics
Money.
thing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that clarification,
What-
because
what
it's
is-
important.
What is the industry standard for sort of what utilization, you know, how do you get from what you're offering a customer to what your total is?
Yeah,
It's a good question.
Michael just asked a good question. You probably want to say it one more time, Mike.
What's the industry standard for figuring out how much bandwidth you have to offer, say, a gigabyte to every
Yeah,
customer?
the short answer to that is you.
Before Netflix and after Netflix.
Exactly. The short answer to that is that you really need to monitor the networks. And our rule of thumb is let's say you have an actual capacity of X, right? If the peak usage starts to go up in the evening hours, right, when people are streaming. If you get to about 70% of your actual capacity at that peak, it's time to upgrade your network, right? And so you need to make sure you have an upgrade path. First, you want to make sure you engineer it so you're not hitting that 70% on day one. But there is, people are all over the map, Michael, and 10 to 1, 25 to 1, I've seen 50 to 1. The reality is, you have to be cognizant of what your capacity is, and you have to have an upgrade path.
So back to this, a minute ago, you insinuated that it'd be hard to hit every home
Just
Could-
with
could you touch
those
on that?
4 standard.
with those towers,
Existing towers.
Yeah,
But
that
you
are
are-
existing.
but with more
carrier
towers, you could
precincts.
hit everything.
So we'll talk about repeater solutions in 2 slides, but yeah, absolutely.
I'm
It-
jumping,
it-
yep.
It is very important.
Stephen, did you have a question?
Well, this is a long conversation, so just in terms of process, because we all have lots of questions. And we're not gonna be making any decisions anytime right away. So I wanted to just ask in terms of process, I know you're not quite done with your presentation. I have 4 or 5 questions. I don't know if we should do that now in this first sitting, or we should obviously let them finish their presentation first. That's the first thing we should do. But then, based on the agenda, the rhythm of these meetings, what do you think about how we should handle going deeper?
Well, it all depends how long the committee wants to be here tonight.
Well, and how willing our guests are too.
And our guests.
We do
We
appreciate
live local.
the time.
We're your neighbors. This is what, our 8th or 9th one of these been recently, and
Yeah.
it's important as
There are only
neighbors.
448 towns
Yeah.
in Maine, so
Yeah.
you've
It's
made
been
a
a
big.
busy-
So, yeah, let's finish the
It's been a
presentation.
busy month.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am running a review session for our final exam students at 7:30, so I have to leave at 7:30. I would like to hear the end of their presentation.
Yeah.
Um,
And then
Yeah.
you'll have the floor first.
Okay.
The last, just 3 slides left.
Okay.
And we've got
Okay.
a nice collection of Q&A from more than one community, and
We
they
do.
seem to rinse and repeat a little bit, so we may be prepared for a lot of them, and we
Great.
welcome that.
Great.
We have written answers.
That's right. And we
Perfect.
have had some communities say, hey, we'll get our questions together, shoot it to you,
Mhm.
we'll respond back. So again, this is predictive, and it is not running through is the try engine. There's a little bit of vetting out that needs to happen before we get to that point, which would mean, if this community decided that you wanted to go further with us, then what you would see would be a prediction, a propagation map like this. And I really do enjoy spending a minute on this slide. I'm fascinated by it. And Jim, pick up anything I missed. But this is for the Katahdin region. And what you have here, excuse me?
3 towns.
That's right, 3 towns. So obviously, if you're familiar with the area at all, and you can see I-95 there, you're talking Medway, East Millinocket, and Millinocket, just by looking at the boundaries. And what you see in the bottom right shows a little bit more of that vetted out process, where we not only have an understanding of what towers will pass structural analysis, but you'll also see what available RAD centers are, or where we would locate our equipment, co-locate, and already having gone through what our orientation of those sectors at 90 degrees would be. There's thought into all of this. So those dots, which I know aren't as crisp as I wish at that zoom, those are the location data we have. Okay? And what's unique about this is those 5 towers, this is something I would never have said months ago. Those 5 towers will provide 100% location coverage, just like that. And the reason I say that is because I've worked for Jim for 7 years, and the other company that we've been getting propagation and analysis from is Nocturana. And again, we've talked about how Nocturana is this new thing that we're blown away by. I give this team a Excel file that has latitude and longitude of every one of those location dots. When they complete this analysis, everyone wants to see this, but the kind of nerd in me likes to jump into that Excel file, and I want to sort low to high, and I want to see the lowest percentage to the highest percentage. So out of 3,670, there was less than 15 that would not have 100% coverage available on that rooftop. So if you look in the top right call-out box, that if you squint, or your eyes are better than mine, you can see a faint outline of a rectangle. And that was important for me to zoom in on that actual dot and show you that really by looking at that square, or that rectangle, the rooftop, that rooftop has 3 different received power levels predicted based on this propagation and the pixelation. Does that make sense? You got in the top left corner that green, then you have maybe a peach color that goes to a top right brighter red color, and those are all depicting different received powers of the technology based on this array we've designed across these 5 towers.
So how do we know that? This goes into a very sophisticated modeling software. It takes into account the trees, the types of trees, the tree density, other structures, right? We call it clutter. And it looks at the tower locations, the height of the radio on the tower, the azimuths of those sectors, the tilts of those sectors, the power level of those radios, the frequency, and then some other unique characteristics of those radios. And it creates this highly digitized map, which is so accurate that we know that if the technician walks from one end of that rooftop to the other, we can see exactly how that received power level is going to change. And that received power level to us translates to something called modulation, which is how fast the radios will talk to one another. And what Andrew's saying is that all but 15 houses with these 5 towers had the rooftops 100%,
Right.
top best modulation, 100% of the rooftop.
And
Crazy.
in the worst, throw in Excel, throw in a filter, sort low to high, high to low. The lowest number out of those 3,600 plus locations was 93%, which means they're all covered. But I already know 15, I can sort and say, here are your most challenging locations in the event that these people choose to sign up, which I hope they do. And we know. So that's a very bullish thing to say 100%. I would never say that. That's just ridiculous. But when you can get this intelligence back, and I should have said earlier, excuse me, in this example with traditional heat mapping, red tends to be maybe bad. And in this case, the red is good, and as you start moving towards the blues and purples, it's bad. So a deeper concentration of your red or autumn colors is a good thing in this illustration, this traditional heat map. So this was a presentation we did relatively recently. Those are, again, you can see that we don't just say it, we mean it. Those are still similar carrier grade tower assets. We do not build towers, we co-locate on existing carrier grade sites. And that was an exciting project to be working on. I don't think I missed anything there, Jim. So again, this is something we could do for this community in the event that you let us know that, we want to go a little bit further with, tonight is learning and education, and we could have something like that created at a later date. Sure. Repeater solutions, we just found this to be really neat because Jim and I had met a gentleman that I don't know if he was the founder of this company, but Jim and I happened to meet years ago at Samoset. I think we were actually enjoying a cocktail on my birthday, and he happened to be sitting at the bar for like a show he was here for, and he works with this really radical resin solution company, and we just thought this was neat to show a product like this. It's not just a traditional utility pole. They're composite based. They're meant to withstand sun, UV, obviously much more hardened for Maine type winters and rugged winters. He says that they are absolutely right out straight with business because of the California wildfires. It can come in different aesthetically pleasing colors. I think you've seen some of these in other areas, probably not many in Maine. But what's really neat about it is this is a solution that doesn't require guy wires. It doesn't require a DOT on convoy coming up 95 to install it. A couple of our technicians can do this. It's a gin pole solution. It comes actually bundled like a Russian nesting doll, if I could refer to it as that. And so it can be relatively transported and deployed on site, and our team could work to get one of these up, of course with some help, your help, whether it was a town plot or some area that would be beneficial to us, but at the end of the day, this is a really neat way to help create a repeater solution.
We call these small cells, and we only need one or two to fill in the gaps. We know after we did the propagation
That's right.
analysis.
That's right. So this was just a quick example from this company, and again, this gin pole operation solution, this neat 78-foot, that's as high as you can go without guy wires. So it's just a neat thing to really show you. Any questions over those couple slides?
So the repeaters, would customers utilizing those have any additional latency?
They would really serve the same purpose as the towers. It's just I can't get this stuff to go through the earth.
No, let me answer your question. So the answer is anytime you add a hop, right, any sort of a router, any sort of a twist in the cable or a bend, you're adding latency. So the microwave backhaul its latency is measured in microseconds, so minimal. But you are routing packets, right? So you connect with the backhaul. It goes down to the cabinet, goes to a router or a switch, and goes back up to the radio that's going to distribute there. You could add maybe a millisecond.
Okay.
Maybe a millisecond. That's about it. When I ping Rockland from my house, our data center in Rockland, it's usually less than 10 milliseconds round trip. So from my house on Appleton Ridge to Hatchet Mountain, goes to the tower on Hatchet Mountain, goes down the tower to the cabinet room, back up to the backhaul to Banner Hill and Rockland, microwave link, down the tower, back up the tower to another microwave shot, down to our data center, and then back. It's less than 10 milliseconds. And my latency is almost always less than 40 to the web. Just depends on what sites I'm connecting to.
Jim, I'd be correct in saying though, that if we needed one repeater, and let's say the 4 sites we selected, let's just say hypothetically two or 5 were fed, and each one of those wirelessly were fed, this would essentially be like a third wireless tower with a backhaul.
It would have a microwave backhaul to one of the carrier grade.
Right.
sites.
So it would mimic the same as another tower that's being backhauled.
To make sure that people on this tower had access to the same reliability, my concern would be not the wireless backhaul and the latency, because that's minimal. It would be putting an emergency diesel generator here, because it's line-powered networks in the state of Maine suffer, and we need to have distributed power systems. We need to have emergency generator backups. You can't practically build them with a wired network, but you can with a wireless network. Let me get to the last slide here. There was a presentation given by the executive director of the Connect Maine Authority on September 29th. 3 of these quadrants, that I wanted to the blue headline, are from her presentation. Objectives of the Connect Maine Authority: to favor future-proof networks, to advance digital equity and inclusion. And these all make sense. What we heard about ruralness, serve low-density, small rural communities, focusing on where the need is greatest. What we heard about goals: maintain focus on future-proof products, balance focus between rural and urban, prioritize projects with higher community value. Red Zone solution plugs into all of these, and I think I've gone over all of these points, so I'm not going to repeat them here now. But bringing it back to Lincolnville, I think you have some of the same challenges that I face in my town. which is, it's hard to justify building a fiber network on top of a fiber. Right? There's not a lot of support for that. But you deserve to have more affordable broadband, and you deserve to have choice. Today, your choice, of course, is low Earth orbit satellite, right? Starlink, and you never bet against Elon Musk. It may not be perfectly stable today, but I'm sure it will get better over time. And Jeff Bezos will be following soon enough. And you'll have other options. You know, T-Mobile will be expanding wireless internet in Maine. They already offer it in some places, home internet. But you know, you're unlikely to have another cable network or another fiber network unless you build one on your own. The whole purpose of this discussion is to say, hey, look, wireless is a viable option. The trajectory the technology is following is one that you should take notice of. And it checks a lot of boxes. I mean, if you could build a network with a one-time investment that touches the maximum amount of real estate, it's definitely wireless, right? And if you're going to build something that, and if you could build something that is 80% less the cost than a wired network, presumably you could pass those cost savings on to your homeowners in the forms of lower rates. Right? If it costs less to build and operate the network, we should be able to pass those cost savings on to consumers. And this is an opportunity, maybe not here, but in other communities, to close the digital divide very quickly. Right? You can light 4 existing towers with this technology inside of 9 months. You can see how that could happen. Whereas it may take 18 months just to order the fiber. It may take, a year just to do the make-ready engineering to put up new cables on poles. So, anyway, I hope this was helpful.
It's terrific.
Could you add, the piece that I'm not hearing is, how you envision, if you did something with Lincolnville, what would be the structure?
Yeah, so, it would be much like we propose in other communities, and we've got some projects that are now advancing. In fact, some of you'll hear announced in the press very, very soon. We would look at the 5-year cost of the project and expect probably a 70-30 split. We absorb 70% of it. You absorb 30% of it. I don't have a number for you tonight, but that's what we propose in other communities. And I think what you'd find is it would be about 80% less than the cost of a comparable fiber project to complete. And it would happen very quickly, right? So that everyone in your community would have access, at least within a year or less. There's always extenuating circumstances. But you should expect everyone in the community would have an alternative option within 12 months.
And then the customer contracts with Red Zone to.
Yeah, they are. We have a broadband services agreement, just a 7-page document. I think the real benefit would be Mainers, it's a tough place to make a living, to say the least. Right? Not a lot of economic activity. And affordability is a far greater issue than availability here in this state. The gap in terms of broadband availability is maybe 7 or 8%. Only 7 to 8% of households in the state don't have access to 25x3 broadband today, the current standard. It's a far greater percentage that can't afford home broadband. And that's not just here around the country. So what we would propose is not only this cost-effective solution from a capital perspective, but we would give you pricing that is like
What does that mean?
Not
Lifetime?
12 months.
Not good.
Lifetime means lifetime. So if you sign up for, let's say you sign up for 100 by 100 service, and let's say we offered that for, I don't know, $75 a month. It's never gonna go up. Now,
Don't move on yet.
Well,
if you move, if you disconnect, so Red Zone's prices will go up with, you know, with inflation, right? But you're locked in. If you move, if you disconnect, if you terminate, if you don't pay your bill, right, and you're terminated, then you're gonna lose your lifetime pricing guarantee. And if somebody comes in a year from now or 2 years from now, they're gonna come in at a higher pricing, but they would also have lifetime pricing.
Probably every one of you knows someone, a friend or a family member that's holding on to an old, maybe US, it's not a knock at anyone, it's just it might be an old AT&T or US Cellular mobile contract that you like your whole family's on with unlimited, and it's this ridiculous rate. I know my parents are, and you know, I'm like, you should be on Verizon. I lived in Arizona for 5 years and I had to make the switch. It was just better coverage than that. There are people that I know here that are still on an old grandfather plan like that, if I could call it that. That is because
Yeah.
it's this ridiculous lifetime opportunity, and they don't want to lose it.
No, you know, why am I doing that? I'm doing it because there is increasing competition in broadband, and that's a good thing. And so if I can acknowledge that there's increasing competition, unlike everything else in our lives, which is going up, go to the gas pump, right? There will be price compression, I believe. And our costs in this business for a wireless provider are relatively fixed, at least over a 5-year span. And I know that not everyone is gonna, even if they sign up for a lifetime, some will be very loyal and dedicated customers, and we welcome that. They'll pay their bill on time every month. And when you promote lifetime pricing, that's what people do, they pay their bill on time because they want to keep it. But others will move on, and that's okay too. So it's a calculated risk, but it's very attractive. We think it's a game changer. We're seeing this start to take shape in other parts of the country, not in Maine, but in other parts of the country, and competitors to the cable company are taking back appreciable market share with this strategy.
Stephen, did you want to jump into questions?
Very quickly, because what David asked were related to my questions, just top of mind. The first question was, you know, what does the consumer proposition look like? And you've just answered that. The second question I had also related a little bit to what he asked, which is, you know, what is actually required from the town? You know, there is no official relationship between LCI and the town of Lincolnville.
Right.
LCI has a relationship with the people who own the telephone poles, but LCI does not have any formal agreement with the town. It is free to offer its service or not, and there is zero leverage that the town has. There is no relationship between the two. With Red Zone, why could you not do the same thing? In other words, why could you not go ahead and provide service here without any official relationship to the
So
town?
we could. You know, our priorities are vast right now, right? We're looking to communities that have waited too long behind the digital divide, that are ready to put up the capital to co-fund these projects. We're also looking at a New England area expansion, 100 towers throughout New England and suburban and urban markets with Toronto. And that's catching our attention. Our principal relationships will always be with our customers. We expect our customers to call us 24/7, right? And we'll answer the phone and try to support them. Everything's up for negotiation though. So if we were to proceed to sharing a broadband services agreement, I would expect that this group would look it over and say, hey, we want certain protections in here. And we negotiate. You know, I think everybody's rethinking what they expect from their provider at this point, and it doesn't hurt to ask.
Can the you'll recover your capital costs through the customer relationship. Can the town also recover its capital costs in some sharing of
Here's what I
revenues?
would say to that. If the town, the answer would be yes, conditioned on the town agreeing to also accept the liabilities for all tower leases, all fiber transport, all sales, all marketing, all customer support. If the town shared equitably in the liabilities and not just funding the capital, then the answer is yes. You know, and I think about this, we always think about the capital cost to build infrastructure. And my town looked at building a library, which we did, and your town did as well. And I remember sitting on the library committee in Appleton and saying, hey, we'll raise that $1 million, but what about the cost to operate the library? Where's that money gonna come from? And so what we're suggesting in any sort of proposal that we would offer is that we're sharing on the upfront infrastructure costs, but Red Zone would be responsible for the liabilities. And if it fails, if we don't find the subscribers that we need, it doesn't rest on your shoulders. Those liabilities, you know, are significant.
Well, I do think that, I mean, there's much to discuss. It's super interesting and appealing and attractive, and I just think that not just specific to Lincolnville, but looking at how this is shaping up statewide, county-wide, you know, I can see a situation where the model that has evolved so far, which is private companies providing direct service to individual consumers outside of any relationship with local government, which is how the system works today. You know, you're not using public bandwidth that's controlled by the town.
Right.
You're using federally controlled bandwidth, but the town and the county have no control over that. The only time, it seems to me, where your operational needs intersect with the town would be for the 4 or 5 towers, and those actually, you know, you'd probably be working with people who already own towers, and you'd be co-locating with them. You'd probably have a relationship with another cable company to provide, you know, backhaul if the current one here can't or won't, which you've already experienced. So I'm just looking at, you know, ways to move this forward. I mean, this particular group is a volunteer citizens group. It has no authority. You could have a volunteer citizens group that has nothing to do with the town, and that is simply the local partner that helps market, for instance, to ensure a higher take rate, which is a very important element of all of this. So I'm just looking at ways to do this that do not involve government, that do not involve either the town or the county. By the way, in terms of funding opportunities, the same is still true. You know, you need to be able to show, and I listened in at the same meeting and have been to several of the others, you need to show community involvement and community support, and particularly enthusiasm for a higher take rate. But none of those things are necessarily synonymous with the town government or the county government. And I can see in some towns and counties where this will happen outside or apart from their direct involvement.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Stephen. Because we are so capital efficient, and because our operating expenses are lower than a wireline network, we think there's a pathway in most communities to take their direct ARPA funding, which is flowing to the towns from the federal government, plug that into a red zone solution, giving you this new blanket so everyone in the entire community has an alternative broadband solution. And it doesn't cost the taxpayers a dime. Those funds can only be used in, you know, for two of you, and I don't have all the answers. We're entering new territory for broadband networks, and I welcome your ideas and your suggestions. And if we can craft something that's revolutionary, that can take hold, that is the benefit of all rural towns in Maine, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, we're very aware that we are unique and that we have unique issues. And so we may have to come up with a unique solution. Anyway, I do apologize.
Yeah.
Great to meet you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks,
Thank
Dan.
you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions from the committee?
I just want to go back to what you just said. You think there's a reasonable possibility that the ARPA funding may be enough to basically
Yeah, you'll see tomorrow.
provide the 30% share that you were talking about for the town?
It's been very close in other communities,
Yeah.
give or take. And I'm not gonna name communities, but there are a couple that we're just sort of, we're negotiating the finer points of our broadband services agreement now. And these are communities that do have people that are behind the digital divide, anywhere from 20% to 80% in the communities. But they're enthusiastic because they look at the cost of a wired alternative, and it means a municipal bond on a community that, is already suffering under the weight of, high property taxes. And they see this as an opportunity to benefit all of the taxpayers, right? Not just plugging in, let's say, a new network just to reach the unserved. And the other alternative, of course, is to take and extend the existing wired infrastructure. Let's say it's a community that's 75% cable internet, right, which is a capable network. If you extend that to reach the other 20%, are you only perpetuating the monopoly? How are you reducing and lowering prices to the residents? You're not.
Right, we were at a community and someone said, well, that we already have a service here that's fine, but then another person spoke up and said, but you want competition, because your prices will never change without it. It was a very interesting point of view, and that those were, it wasn't our team speaking on our behalf, it was the community themselves communicating with each other about that topic. It was interesting.
So, while you're talking to towns, why isn't this going on at the state level where you can draw a map, put up underserved areas?
Yeah, this is, I think it's safe to say that the state of Maine is still in the education phase. It's important, I think, for people to be skeptical. But the way you respond when you're skeptical of something is to seek knowledge, right? That hasn't happened yet. I hope it does. I've encouraged it at the state level. I'd like to see engagement because I believe, and if you look at other states around the country, what we know, what we've seen firsthand, what we see other states doing is evidence that we can close Maine's digital divide completely and have money left over to solve other problems in our communities. We don't have to burden the taxpayers any more than they already are. And we can provide a competitive service, an umbrella, if you will, throughout the entire state, very quickly and cost effectively. So there's some education that needs to be done. I would say currently there's a strong favoritism to fiber networks. The
have a few rapid fire questions. So the first one is, could you guarantee in a contract that everyone would be covered in Lincolnville through
Yes.
repeaters and the
Yes.
numbers? Okay. Next question is, what are the plans and the prices that you plan on offering with this new service?
Yeah, on day one, we're planning on offering 3 plans, 100 by 20. 100 by 100, and then 500 by 100. And I'll say up to 500 by 100.
Okay.
It's relatively easy to jump over the lower bars. You know, some people, in the evening hours, you might only see 350 or 400 on that last one.
And do you have pricing yet for this?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's somewhat negotiable, but we're looking at, what do you say, $59 a month for 100 by 20. 79 for 100 by 100, and no, 99 for 500 by 100.
Okay.
And that's, you know, that's the lifetime pricing.
And you already have, so the Toronto Tech has already been certified by the FCC, it's already deployed, it's ready to go, it's not beta, it's
That's correct.
all
Yeah,
set.
some
Okay.
quick patents here in the last year. I was very surprised to see that a lot of their recent ones were approved in a year. It's very rare to see.
You're ahead of me, I didn't research the patents.
So IP is one of the first things I look at when we're talking about new technology, but, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Let me just think, there's something else. And you said within 6 months from us signing a contract and dispersing of the funds, you could potentially be up and running here?
Yeah, the answer is yes. You know, the construction phase itself can happen in a matter of a couple of weeks.
Okay.
To lay 4 towers. You've got structural analysis on the towers. That's something the tower owner does. It happens very quickly, but there's the permitting process, right?
Transport, time of year, right?
But, you know, the step 1 is a propagation analysis to see what we could cover from the existing infrastructure. Step 2 is making sure that there are what we call radiation centers, rad centers available on these towers, right? We'd actually verify those before we do the propagation analysis. And we want to solve this fiber issue. We want to know where we're going to connect this network to get 10 gig, at least 10 gig fiber. I'm not certain we can get it from, you know, our would-be competitor.
And then last question for me, what is the cost for each customer to have the radio on their roofs?
Yeah, we're, you know, we would propose a $100 installation fee.
Okay.
One time.
Okay, thank you.
I did have a question, just because we talked about taxpayer money and, so would you say that the technology is the impetus for this, or do you feel like that maybe the disbursement of the ARPA funds and the CARE money, is there any relation? Because it just seems like, and this isn't pointed to you guys specifically, but, you know, we've seen, and you know this because you've been in it and you've been a resident here,
It's a great
we have a
question.
long period of inaction by all ISPs. And then coincidentally, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars are being flooded out, and we see now everybody is willing to move. So that's just a philosophical question.
No, it's actually a great question. And the answer is, in our case, it's the technology that's driving it. I can tell you that I was talking to my regulatory attorneys in May of this year down in Washington, D.C., and I said, you know, I've held out for a long time. I'm passionate about wireless. I've always been passionate about wireless. I see it as the future. But with the technology we have at our disposal, I'm talking about LTE and 5G technology on our licensed spectrum we have in the state, I can't compete. And so I need to file as a competitive local telephone company, and I need to start hanging fiber. And my attorney said, Jim, at your age, you should have a True story. True story.
I have a
A
question.
month later, Toronto is knocking on my door. It was like a gift from heaven. I mean, it's a truly game-changing, disruptive technology, and it's very capital efficient. So, yeah, it happens to align with all of this funding, but, we know that for every community where we propose a wireless solution, it's gonna cost 80% less than a fiber alternative. The question is, will the application process to compete for funds be skewed toward a wired solution, right? Will it favor the fiber? And I don't know the answer to that. It's possible that the Maine Connectivity Authority or the Connect Maine Authority combined says, we're not gonna authorize fixed wireless. They might say that. I don't know. I think it's a tragedy if they do. But, my opinion doesn't matter. I'm not making those rules.
Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to know, say you determined that there was a need for one or two repeaters. How do you know that you're going to be able to secure a location for that? Has that been an
Good
issue
question,
ever?
Yeah, the answer is, I don't. I gotta be honest with you. I mean, my preference would be to just secure a spot in the right of way, right?
Is there anything in the town in this partnership or agreement that would benefit? So, hey, yeah, you could put something near this building, it's town owned, it's not the neighbor that could cut the power, and those are things Jim and I and the team have talked about from a pecking order,
So-
what would be most ideal.
But with that propagation analysis, we would know, as you can see, precisely where the gaps would be. And then, I would presume if the goal were to get 100% coverage everywhere, that we would address that before any agreements were signed.
Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, we had consultants coming in to help us figure out what our next steps are. And we bring up wireless, and they'd all heard about you. So two of the questions that jumped out were, one guy said, why Fayette? This is a earth-shattering technology. Why is a small town in Maine? I think he said Fayette. So that's one question. And the second question is, we've heard the wireless story over and over again, and it never delivers. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that's what you're up against. So if
Sure.
we could speak to both of those.
Yeah, let's speak to the first one. Why Fayette? You've seen Fayette in the news. So curiously, 10 years ago, I went up to Fayette because they were looking to close their digital divide. 10 years ago. Just showed Andrew a picture.
Mark, remember?
Yeah, Mark, the town manager, remembers me. And at the time, I probably would have delivered a megabit per second to the town just 10 years ago. Now we're talking about hundreds of megabits per second. But I was aware that the West Kennebec Lakes Association, all of the towns in that area, were looking to close their digital divide. And I knew they were probably looking at fiber solutions. We have, with the help of Michael Kosowski, built and evolved a very, very capable wireless planning tool that has every tower in the state, has all the underlying GIS data, many, many layers to it. And we can very quickly look at any of these towns and make an assessment, just like we did in sort of pre-propagation analysis, like we did for Lincolnville. And looking at Fayette, it was this home run. It was just slam dunk. We said, we can do this one. And they're looking for a solution. And so we actually went right up there on day one with a proposal in hand. And I think it just checked all the boxes with the selectmen in that community, and they said, yeah, we need this, This, I think for a lot of communities, we've been talking to a number of them, there's this fear of, if we go the wireline route, we build a fiber network, and it's gonna cost millions of dollars. Are we gonna get, even if we have to, if there's a municipal
think the consultant's comment was really about why is Tirana interested in a small town in Maine?
Yeah, so, interestingly, and this is purely coincidental, the, one of the board members doesn't have a house in Fayette. He has a house in neighboring Mount Vernon. We looked at Mount Vernon and we said, that's not a good, we can cover a lot of it,
Okay.
but we looked at Vienna as well, and we said, not so good. Wayne, maybe 75%, but Fayette was like, 100%, this is the one that we need to target. So that's why, now, your second question though, second comment, which is, the reputation. We have one of the highest Google review scores of any ISP in the state of Maine. So to say that fixed wireless has let anybody down, I think is just plain wrong. Cable companies and sometimes fiber companies can have the worst reputation. There's a lot more than just raw speeds. Sometimes it's the reliability, it's the consistency of the speeds, it's who answers the phone when you call, and are they supportive, are they helpful? There's a lot of elements.
Yeah, I just think Tirana's performance
I think-
changed tremendously.
May I ask, how long, is there any places in the country that had this technology for at least 10 years? Or is this such a new technology? I don't,
Yeah. So I'll answer that two ways and say, wireless has been in our lives
Right.
now.
but this particular,
So this variant has been in the field for, I'd say, about 2 years now, between testing and real world deployments.
How many
Yeah.
guys did they have up?
They're adding like, I think, a dozen sites a month right now. I mean, I don't know how many he has. Tyson Curtis in Texas is adding even faster than that. I told you about MTN in South Africa. But yeah, I mean, we're not bleeding edge because this isn't technology that we invented, right? But it is definitely leading edge. And I would say that inside of 10 years, you might want to do a physical upgrade of some sort. I don't know that for certain, it depends on the demand. That could just be software upgrades on existing, or it could mean that you add an additional sector, different frequency bands or something on the towers, to inject more capacity in certain areas. But you can do that relatively quickly. Michael, I want to go back to your question though. I think dismissive comments like that tend to favor one technology over the other. I find them to be very troubling. I find them to be very closed-minded. I made a lot of points here tonight why I think wireless is the end game. And I'll say, look, 70% of all internet traffic today originates from a mobile device. 70%. 99% of all internet traffic today originates from a wireless device. 99%. If fiber is so great, why don't we build fiber in our homes? We have wireless in our homes. You really gonna wire everything in your house? We would be so encumbered if we wired networks. So, it is a new day, and to date, everything that's been built with fixed wireless has either been built on the Wi-Fi standard, which is meant for the home, like I said earlier, or it's been built on the mobile standard, LTE and 5G, and that's purpose-built for mobility. And from a technology standpoint, I can tell you why either one of these doesn't do what it needs to do. To succeed in the world of wireless, fixed wireless to the home, you have to solve two problems: coverage and capacity. The Wi-Fi standard does a good job of capacity for a small number of users, but it tends to break apart at scale. The to break it apart and rebuild it to get what you need. Tirana has a lead on its competition right now because there's over 300 million invested in the company and has a very bright future. I can't promise you that they won't be taken out by some tech giant in the next couple of years. That is possible. I know that the technology, though, will survive the company. And I know that wireless will continue to get better and better. And I just think we need to give it serious consideration.
Any last questions from the committee?
Yeah, just
I-
real ballpark, what do you think the cost is to get up and going?
Here,
In a range, not a, is it a 500 to $1 million, $1 million to 2, because the fiber is, we've been told, 2 million something.
let me,
And I'm, a total ballpark, nothing would hold you to it.
yeah, I would say, I should have thought of this before I came in here.
So is there a useless number you can give us?
Let's say,
I just want a range, just
Yeah.
a sense of,
Sorry.
are we in millions or are we in hundreds of thousands or?
no, I would say, it's in the ballpark of $1 million.
That's the total cost, you mean?
The capital cost is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, I have to.
If it's premature, that's fine,
It's premature.
It is premature, it is premature. I mean, it's,
that's fine, I'm good with premature.
yeah, I mean, I'm trying to run some numbers in my head.
Don't feel the need to, because it's point, really, there's no point in you throwing an arbitrary number out there.
I completely agree, yeah.
Arlene, did you wanna follow up with
Well,
something?
it's just, I'm not, we all have Wi-Fi, we all use cell phones, which we put up,
Mm.
and, I'm just wondering about this particular technology that is new, the wireless technology, and its capabilities, and has any studies been done on health effects? That's all I think that knowing, I lived here for 40 years, and I
Right.
know that might be a question that some people will ask.
You're not the first.
No, it's a legitimate question.
Okay, I'm
There's
not,
2 ways to
I'm
answer
not
it.
trying to throw water on you,
No,
but
no.
it is, and I don't know enough of this technology to even ask you the right questions about it, so.
There's 2 ways to answer it. One is, the FCC has done rigorous testing over the years, and they only allow transmission at certain power levels in each of these bands, right? They said very clear, and so we operate within those limits. It doesn't mean it's safe, right? It means we think it's safe. The other thing I'll speak to, though, is if you look at a spectrum of radiation, right, radio frequency, you have non-ionizing radiation
Mhm.
and ionizing radiation. By ionizing, it means that, you can affect the cellular structure, right, the atomic structure in the body. And X-rays, the sun, very high frequency radar systems are all ionizing. Anything nuclear in this given radiation is ionizing. Alpha particles, beta particles, for example. Your microwave oven,
Mhm.
which operates in a nearby band, is non-ionizing. Your cell phone is non-ionizing.
Right,
We operate in that same region
okay,
of cellular, of Wi-Fi, lower power than cellular,
mhm.
lower power, but similar frequency range, non-ionizing radiation. What's really amazing, I kind of geeked out on this stuff. If you look at TV stations and FM stations and AM stations, the amount of power that they put out is absolutely incredible. Hundreds and sometimes thousands of, even the megawatts in some stations. So much energy that some of you will remember what used to be called a crystal radio. Very crystal radio. You can literally take a coil of wire and a capacitor, two electronic elements. You put them together with a diode and no battery. You hook it up to an earpiece and put it in your ear, and you can listen to AM stations
Oh my God.
hundreds of miles away. And you say, how are you doing that? There's no amplifier. There's so much energy after hundreds of miles that you're causing that earpiece to resonate. AM, the amount of energy you're getting from an AM station hundreds of miles away is more than the energy you're getting hit with from this across, halfway across town.
That's why they talk so softly.
I'll bring one to our next meeting.
So, but again, those are, even though they're so powerful, they're non-ionizing radiation. And so, I'm sure there have been lots of studies over the years, and some of them may be conflicting. But the consensus is that cellular, FM, AM are not harmful to the human body.
And did you say that this technology has is lower powered than cell towers?
It is.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Keep in mind as well, when you, I don't know what most of us have either Verizon, AT&T, or US Cellular, or an old provider. The weaker the cell signal, the more power your phone is putting out. So if you have a really weak signal in your house, and you're putting the phone to your ear, if that's something you're concerned about, just know that you should boost the signal. What I recommend, what I have in my house, is a little microcell. So I don't have any cell phone coverage in my house. So my mobile carrier, Verizon, ships me a device that looks a lot like my router, plugs into my router, and it puts out LTE in my house. So everybody that comes to my house that's a Verizon customer will see 4 bars of LTE.
Has that gotten better, the technology? Because years ago, I had one from Sprint, and it was useless. I mean, it didn't.
Is your provider Verizon?
No, I have T-Mobile now.
I can't speak for T-Mobile, but for Verizon, it has been a game changer in my house. Wi-Fi calling has just been hit or miss.
Oh, well, I just use
We've
Wi-Fi.
used the Microsoft for the last 2 years. It's still riding on Resound's network,
Yeah.
but the calling is just flawless. Yeah, highly recommend it. I think Verizon gave it to us at no cost.
Well, they do, because they want you to have the coverage. They
That's right.
said,
That's right.
All right, any remaining questions?
No.
For these two? All right, well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, and do send the presentation so we can attach it to the minutes.
And we'll follow up.
Thank you for your time and patience. We appreciate it.
We can catch everyone, or is there anyone that needs a spare copy?
I think everyone's missing. Everyone's covered, and if we could get a digital version through email, that would be fantastic, with some hyperlinks.
There's a site for the PDF.
I think they're gonna send that over, so the
Okay.
hypertext
Yeah,
will
that'd
be
be
in
great.
there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Would you like to give this copy to somebody else, or anybody else that should be select person or something?
All right, guys.
There's another member, right?
Have a safe drive.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, safe trip back to Appleton,
Yeah.
Rockport.
Go get my plow blade on my truck, right? Snow coming tomorrow?
1 inch.
Oh, really?
Should be only 1 inch, yeah.
Hope so.
That's what I heard.
I hadn't heard.
The ground is
Thanks,
too
folks.
soft.
All right,
Good evening.
Hey.
thanks, guys. All right, well, thank you everyone for being so
That was interesting.
so patient and yeah, I thought that was great to have that much information. Thoughts?
Yeah, I'm really, this whole thing about the bad reputation of wireless, I would have liked to hear more about where Jim thought that came from. I understand he's saying that's not their problem, but
Well, he was
wireless
saying
is
that
bad.
it's been only 2 years with this technology, and I can remember I called Hughes.net when I first moved to Lincolnville, because I just thought, oh, well, I'll get my internet that way, and they literally told me, no, don't
It
bother.
has a bad reputation because it can't, it has not performed. It
Yeah, they
has
have
no
not been able to
penetration
do
now.
it.
So
Red
it's-
Zone
it's-
has not
if they-
performed.
But Red Zone has thousands of customers, so I think it has been able to
Very
perform.
affected by hills and geography, so some places it works, some places it doesn't.
Right, yeah, I mean, I've got friends that tried Red Zone here and it didn't work well,
Oh,
but apparently this technology is just night and day. It's a different technology according to them, so.
I mean, that really is the
But-
question is, if the quality and reliability was there, this is a perfect solution, but that's the big if, right?
Yeah.
My biggest concern is the whole repeater issue, because I can tell you with almost 100% certainty that that signal is not gonna hit my house where I live, and from those towers, because if it did, my phone would be there.
Well, those towers don't necessarily
I
carry
just,
or
that's my
carry.
biggest concern is getting, nobody's phone works in my house. So,
Hmm.
I just think getting those locations for repeaters could be an issue.
So let's start with the more basic question.
Okay.
Okay, let's assume the tech works. Let's assume it covers 100%. Let's assume the repeater issues are resolved. How do we feel about this for Lincolnville? So he just said for pricing.
I was just gonna say, for me, the pricing would have to be much lower than what it is,
I
because
think so too, 'cause they
their
don't even
return on
offer
investment, it's to their advantage, the environment where it's high pricing due to the standard transmission of internet. And so they're coming in, to his own admission, it's 80% cheaper capital-wise for them to set up. But we're seeing very similar pricing structures other ways. So their ROI is huge. And if they're really doing this in a way that's supposed to be beneficial to the community, and to his credit, he said that things are negotiable, but I would like to see a much cheaper offer, personally. That's
Okay, not quite my question. Could we live with this? Is what I'm saying. Could we live with? Do we think either if it was between stick with what we have right now and these prices, is this better for Lincolnville? I guess that's my.
The one benefit I see is that they're gonna be able to cover the uncovered, and it's not gonna be an overlay of, like you said, of more lines, if that's something we went with, or, I mean, the alternative may not be as attractive as just covering those who are not served or underserved. But again, as far as saving people money at their prices, that's not gonna work.
But yes, if we're living in a hypothetical world where everything performs exactly the
Yeah,
way it
it's
should,
just assuming that.
then
Okay.
even just from a competitive standpoint, yes, I would be I'd be very welcoming to them coming in, because I feel like that's also an important element. If they can cover the uncovered, and they actually can have access, and $100 installation fee is nominal.
Mhm.
And this is purely hypothetical, assuming that everything works. Yeah, I think that any company that could come in and offer coverage, that would be beneficial, for sure.
Because guys, keep in mind that right now LCI, and I just finally got off of my legacy 20/20 LCI plan. I just moved to the 100/20, and my bill is at $110 a month. This is literally half of what I pay for 100/20. So right there, it's half the price.
It is half, but we're required to have a phone through Lincolnville, through LCI.
Yeah.
So that's actually a service that they're providing, over and above. Maybe
You give me
don't
the
want
phone.
it, but
Even the
it's
phone
still.
line.
Yeah, it's like $10 or $20 a month.
Well, it isn't, not
And
even
that's-
have all the long distance and everything.
I know, I had to get
Why even have?
I had to get it just so that I could call Josh and not get charged
Right.
$5 a
Right.
phone call. But
So is this
so-
now what we're doing is saying yay or nay to
No.
it, or?
No, we're just
No,
talking.
we're
Just talking. This is just
I
a
can't, I
discussion.
have to reread this.
Of course.
I have to learn more about the technology, because that's what I need to do when anything I get, like freedom of access, I had to research for 2 months to
this is just
understand.
a reaction while it's fresh in our
So I
minds.
just have to get into, what is this really,
Absolutely.
what are we doing here? I mean, the question I asked him about health, I don't know that answer. From some of the there's a 5G, issue. I try to look at the research that's happening, and that's why I asked, how new is this technology, and exactly how does it work? And that's just, you know, how I go about things, so,
In,
Yeah, Mike.
so in terms of pricing,
What? 2
if-
years
if-
is new.
we don't have the option of LCI without landline, but if we did, it would probably be the same 59 maybe,
Sorry,
roughly.
What's that?
If you could have LCI without a landline,
Right,
it's gonna be in the same ballpark,
Well-
the same
well-
59 maybe.
I think that's.
The minimum price right now for LCI fiber, which is 50 over 10, is $70 before the required landline.
Okay,
So,
okay.
and,
So-
I mean, that's just, they always, for now, they require it, so.
Right, so this is a little cheaper at 100. I wonder if they'd be willing to provide a slower service for less money. That might make it affordable for some people.
Mhm. Were you gonna
Or
say
is that
something?
furthering the digital divide?
Yeah, you know, I don't think you can even have the discussion without knowing if the reliability and the quality is there. If it is, I mean, look at our alternatives. We can do our own municipally owned system. And the cost that involves, the operating it, the voter buy-in, I mean, we have a lot of challenges along the
Yeah, I
way.
agree.
If this worked and you, for upfront money of 300, 400 grand, you can have everybody covered, you have a quality product, if it works, and LCI is still there, so you actually have some competition, you know, it's a beautiful solution, but it's all about, does it work? And, you
Yeah.
know, so.
To me, I'm just thinking about all the different options for us. I would like, at the end of our feasibility study, when that's done in, who knows, April, May, June, we have all these options laid out before the board.
Mhm.
And you can see, okay, fiber to the home, 20-year build cost, you know, $4 to $5 million or something. Red zone, $300,000 to $400,000. Do nothing. Try to work with LCI, and just have those options in front of us. But because I still personally favor running fiber to every home. If we knew it paid back in 20 years, if we knew the cost savings were there, and if we knew that voters would actually want to do that. But it's such a heavy lift, as you said. I mean, millions upon millions of dollars versus a few $100,000.
And then
If it
actually,
works.
if it was the fiber that we ran, the town would have to have some involvement there, and I think that could
Forever.
significantly raise taxes, whether you
You know,
say it
they
does
had-
or doesn't. I mean, hiring people just to be involved in that.
To maintain it forever, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Arlene?
if they had the Katahdin, is that up and running now?
No, nothing's up and running.
I'm
They
just
just
saying that,
announced
you
this
know, if they had,
a few months ago.
I mean, I looked at what they did and this sounds like a pilot program in Rockland.
Yeah,
It was,
And-
it was a
yeah,
test.
there's a pilot.
It's a pilot, okay, and Katahdin, I'm trying to look at the terrain here and our terrain and
Mhm.
again, I'm speaking of what I don't know.
Yeah.
So, and then I looked at this, but this is, you know, I'd like to see this up and running.
Well, it may be up and running in a few months. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
thing. They said that they can get this stuff up in a few months. There's already a bunch of towns ahead of us that seem to be going forward. So we may see a few towns in Maine before our studies.
And like
And
you
then
said-
right there's our proof, at least in some Maine towns, that it's working. And, you know, to me, I would only support going with them if the contract stated 100% coverage, and they said that they would guarantee that.
But Steve's point, why is the town involved in all? It's an inducement to get them to come in, or it's, you know, why? Are they saying, well, you have the money, so you might as well give it to us? So what is the town even a part of this for?
They know we're desperate. They know all these towns are desperate, and they're sitting on ARPA money.
Well, I'll say why the town's involved, because they want our money.
They
That's
want
why
their
the town's
funding.
involved. If there was no ARPA, the town wouldn't be a part of it.
Yeah, and they would probably just build it anyways,
That's the question, yeah.
so.
Well, I think
If we
they
could
wanna
prove-
also be more welcomed. I don't know that the town would be that welcoming, like for a repeater or whatever else. I mean, they could come
Right.
in and sell it, but
Right,
they
true.
wouldn't be as well
Because
received.
the way this works is we sell it, the select board sell it to the town.
Right.
We get the buy-in from the town.
Right.
Right.
If
But
there were
give
no,
them a favor that way.
if there was no funding, we would just have to prove that there were enough people interested in it. The best we could do is prove you're gonna get a lot of people, so why don't you come in?
Well, we wouldn't have to prove anything, they would have to do all that on their own, and then they, and.
No, if we wanted to attract them,
To get them here, because there's all these towns in Maine that
Right.
supposedly,
Mhm.
they're all potential customers for them.
And we may be able to get creative, I mean, we may put the money up and may negotiate some way of getting that back. Cause they could charge, you know, if you bake in the price, we also may bake in a way to get the money back to the town.
We could, yeah, it's all negotiable. I mean,
Or you might just wanna keep prices down and basically subsidize.
The other thing is that we don't know how this ARPA money is gonna be spent, and it's not referring to us, but there's some naivete that's built into this on these ISPs that think that this money is best. It's not. I don't know, I mean, I don't know if you looked at what the Waldo County, how they're using their money.
Do we even know what our share is now and?
220,000,
Yeah.
split over
And
two payments.
But that's still-
has that already been committed to other things, or is
No.
that sitting there?
No.
But that has to go through a budgeting process, which frankly, the town controls. It's not like the select board can just say, we're gonna unilaterally spend this money.
Actually, our town attorney, just if we wanna get specific, my recollection was that David said, the town attorney technically said the select board could decide how to spend it. But
What-
I don't
how
think
much did
we
you
can do
say?
that.
You'd want
2.25,
the
is that what you said?
What's that?
225, is that what you said?
220.
Dispersed evenly over 2 years.
220.
This year and next year, so we have our first chunk already.
town. It would be an elegant way to do it if that all fit together.
And
Now-
but the other thing is that now bring us back into the realistic world, is that if we invest $300,000 on something that turns out not to work, that would be a terrible thing.
Yeah.
That's why it's all about figuring out what
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. Michael, you gotta promise us that the maps are good.
I can tell you what, I can vouch for what goes into the map, but I don't know what the propagation
But
studies.
you
The one we have here is line of sight.
You can protect yourself though, that if you put
Scenario's gonna
300,000 in and it doesn't work,
Maybe somebody.
In the contract.
there could be a penalty where the money comes back and what if you lost?
And that's how it was, I mean,
Yeah.
and look, I'm trying to not favor one option over the other. I think the consistent theme that we have to have, no matter what option we're looking at or who we're dealing with, is that we have to put the interests of the town first and foremost and put protection in. So whether it's LCI, whether it's a municipal option, whether it's red zone,
Yeah.
the most important thing here is making sure that we're taken care of and that we're protected.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that's why this contract, if we sign a contract with them, it would have to have those protections.
You also have leverage right now, cause they haven't got a town test case, and yes, we could be the test case, but they could also really make the deal sweet for us to
Right.
get us up and going.
And it is a sweet deal for them. They have the ability for them to make money. I mean, again, their profit margin is gonna be much larger than
It's like
LCI.
sky high.
It is, because you look at what they have to invest, the maintenance is very, very little. You have to build 4 towers and get 4 diesel
So the
generators.
towers exist already.
You just have to
Put it
Oh,
on the tower.
They
Oh,
said
okay.
to hang.
Yeah, so
They just have
it's,
to hang.
you know what I'm saying? So, that's why they were slick and they had a marketing campaign, but the whole lifetime locked in fee, and like, well, yeah, of course you can offer that because you have fixed costs. So, offering me to pay the same amount over 5 years is not any skin off of your teeth. It's just, you have a guaranteed income that's coming in for a fixed capital investment.
But it's still nice.
It is, but I'm just looking at it
But right.
coldly at the numbers, and that wasn't meant as an insult, but look, everything about this is profitable for them.
Yeah.
So,
That's why they're here.
Yeah.
That's why they made these really nice.
yeah.
It's heavy duty paper.
Right.
I'm impressed.
And that's not a negative, against them, but again, we're looking out for our interests, they're looking out for theirs,
Yeah.
and I just, you gotta call a spade, like, I don't, I know you're gonna be making money, so it's okay, you don't have to act like you're going out of your way or taking money out of your pocket to do us favors when I can see the calculations are right in front,
Are you subscribing to the Waldo County, the five town,
Yeah.
discussion group?
I am.
Because they are having this discussion that we're having right now about red zone.
Okay.
And we can all subscribe to their email chain. It's
Can
all
you just
free.
forward how you do that?
What's that?
Just forward the link for subscribing.
Okay, I'll do that.
Has
The,
Red Zone approached them to
Yeah,
offer
Yeah,
this?
they gave a presentation and then now they're discussing it just the way we're doing right now.
like the same conversation.
Same
Yes.
conversation.
No, I was just say, if you go ahead, you sign, and then LCI drops its price and
Right.
is willing to install everywhere, and then it's over.
But it's great, then we have
Yeah.
that competition.
Right.
Um,
We just have to
it just-
protect that 300 grand.
Exactly, and
Right.
that's why I said that about, you know, serendipitous, that all of a sudden there's money flowing and now everybody wants to do something. And there's, you know, no, they're not gonna admit that, but, and again, this isn't meant as a negative. Look, people run businesses to make profit. I don't begrudge anyone for that, but let's be honest here. You know, there's not, you know,
Think of that though, you have two strong service providers that, they may not treat you right, but at least you have a choice, better
Yeah.
than being one.
Oh, sure, no, that would be great. I just
Yeah.
wonder if that leads to a failure on the wireless side, because the price drops
mhm.
on
So-
the wired side.
well, they would have to be competitive.
Yeah.
So-
No, you're right.
Two things. So, the ARPA money, I struggle to see substantially what else we could even spend the money on besides broadband. So I think that's a positive in this. And then, in terms of their costs, they're saying that we would pay 30%. And maybe it's $1 million, they're not really sure. I mean, you know, I don't know how much these radios cost. They could be $10,000 and their cost could be $100. I mean, who knows? Ultimately, I guess to me it doesn't matter. What matters is what are we willing to pay as a town to get the service? And if they're making a huge profit off of it, then good for them. But it's what, you know, ultimately what are we willing to pay? That matters.
And I do think that there is, not to take us off, but I do think there's going to be resistance against spending all the money on internet. Just do.
I know there
We're
is.
s- You know,
Mhm.
the county has found ways to, and I'll say it, I don't care, to circumvent the rules, regulations, and recommendations that have come from top down. You know, people are building jails, they're building dispatch centers, it's a very loose terminology to say COVID-related expenses. And we're already seeing in our board meetings that there are calculations that are going on to see what the projected loss of or lack of income over the last year is or so. So it's not something that's gonna be like neatly tied up with a bow. Just, people are gonna have an opinion. I can guarantee, I mean, I know the community, people are going to, they're going to want to spend this money in a way where they feel like it's giving relief. So there's going to have to be a lot of community outreach going on, regardless of what's happening, for us to spend. And maybe I'm wrong, but I just feel like that's the pulse of the community, that we really have to have everybody on board to wanna spend this money on internet in one way or another. And because even if we can unilaterally as a select board, if it's legal to do, that doesn't mean that there won't be community repercussions.
No, we should still go to the
Yeah,
town
but
and
you know,
sell the vote,
yeah,
right?
exactly, so and we're all in the same place, it's gotta be rock solid, and we've gotta know. And you know, I'm sitting here looking, I wasn't being rude, like looking at my email, I'm reading through these patents, and you know, like the oldest one is from like 3 years ago, and the newest ones they applied a year ago, and they were just granted like a month ago, 2 months ago. So these things are very, very fresh, and they're making a lot of bold claims. I mean, I'm reading here, and it's, so I'm not saying it doesn't do that, but we live geographically in a very hard place to penetrate because of mountains, because of hardwood, because of all that stuff. So, you know, do we wanna pay $300,000 to be a test subject for Toronto? And I don't have an answer for that, but if it was hypothetical and everything worked the way it was, was supposed to, I would say, heck yeah. I mean, I feel like it's almost a no-brainer. You know, if we can use funds that don't come out of the taxpayer rules and offer coverage to, even if it was 95% of the people in town, I would be all for that, but we live in reality, so we have to see. And that's the last thing I have to say about that tonight.
All right, anything else on Red Zone for tonight? Okay, so let's move on to discussion about future committee work. I just want to give all of you an update. So the board in a 3-4-1 abstention vote, approved going with Axiom, to move it forward to the contract phase.
It wasn't unanimous?
What's that?
Was it
There was
u-
one abstention.
One
and we had
abstention.
Mike Ray was not present, so.
Our chair
Okay.
abstained, with no comment, and Mike wasn't there.
Okay.
And so our town attorney and town administrator are currently working on that contract, and perhaps we'll see it next week, I'm not sure, so that's where that is right now.
And what about the funding? Is that going to be the grant
The $20,000 disbursement that came
from,
from the county.
from Island Institute?
All right.
Remember, you're
Well,
gonna
we
have,
have 5,000 allocated that we budgeted, and then we also have a $20,000 disbursement, which we all agree upon using for that from Waldo County. So together, we've got $25,000 available to us.
but I thought the Island Institute needed more information.
They do.
Okay,
They
is that,
do.
was that given to them? I thought,
No, I kind of forgot about that, frankly.
oh, okay, I'm
I
sorry.
apologize.
But
That
as
was
it
supposed
is,
to be
we've got
put on this
$10,000
agenda
more
for
than
the-
we
Yeah,
used.
let's talk about that at our next
Okay.
meeting.
The other
Did I
thing-
send that? I feel like I forwarded that to everyone. Did I do that?
What, the,
The Island Institute's questions.
yeah, and that you were going to put it on the agenda for the board to talk about
Okay,
on the 13th. I think that's what I remember from it.
So I think it's kind of late tonight, this has been a good night, but what I'd like to see us do soon is kind of, really lay out what we're doing, how we're gonna do it efficiently.
Yeah.
Go back over what the selectmen want us to do, and then make sure everybody in the committee kind of agrees on what the path is for doing that, because
Yeah.
it'd be easy to jump from side to side and
Yeah.
get pulled different ways.
well, the biggest reason for our existence is, at this point, once the contract is signed, to work with the consultant.
Right, but, so what,
What does that mean?
what is that sequence of what we're doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And are we gonna break up into groups and work on things, or are we gonna, cause otherwise we can just get into group settings where we,
Right.
talk
I
about-
wonder if for that meeting, we actually ask if Mark Roulette can be here. So
He can
he's
hear.
there and he's like, well, yeah, this, that seems like would be a more productive
kind of a
conversation.
workshop, how are we gonna run,
Right, how are we gonna do this, Mark?
what are our achievables, how are we gonna achieve them?
Yeah, right, okay. So until we sign that contract with them, do we need to have another meeting, as a committee? Do we wanna have another meeting as a committee?
So the rest.
How long is it gonna take?
Well,
Is it like a couple of weeks or a couple of?
let me bring up what our proposed timeline was.
I mean, it shouldn't take long to put together a contract, right?
No, I would hope it's before us next week. So, yeah, here, the timeline was for the board to approve the contract to December 13th and work begin December 14th. Now, we're then going into the holiday season,
Yeah.
so I think realistically after New
So
Year's.
maybe
And
the
do
start of
we-
January, yeah.
Do we, so they're going to accept the contract, but do we have to have the money for it at the same time? Is that,
We already do.
We already
That's
do.
what I was just explaining to you, yeah.
Oh.
We have $25,000 in
we did
funds.
get that,
No, it's completely independent of the island institute, so I'll
Okay.
explain again. So we have $5,000 that we budgeted
Right.
last year. We have a $20,000 disbursement from Waldo County from ARP funds that we can use to our discretion, but the recommendation was for broadband. So we take the $20,000 from Waldo, the $5,000 we already have allocated, we have $25,000. The initial sticker price of the contract was $15,000, so we have enough to cover it. And
Oh,
if we get a
good,
grant from
okay.
the Island Institute, then that puts us in an even better place.
Yeah,
okay.
but the funding, yeah.
Okay, we have the
12,000
funding for it,
funds.
So
okay,
that
that's
should
just
be
what I
full
wanted to
five, right?
clarify, okay.
Yeah.
So,
Alright,
but-
thank
so
you.
yeah, which is, we've kind of
Right.
been behind the eight ball and now we are in front of it.
Right,
Great.
okay.
Okay,
So it sounds like a and start off goal setting, planning.
that's right, I think that makes the most sense.
So I'm gonna say, we're saying probably January is when that happens?
Yeah.
The selectmen are gonna award the contract mid-December,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, I don't think we wanna be meeting, around Christmas.
If we could meet in the third week of January, that would be fantastic for me. I'm only one singular person, but that would,
And I'm a singular person that after that week of January, I'm gonna be gone for 6 weeks, so.
after the third week,
I'll be here till almost the end of January.
okay,
Well, we can talk about that
okay.
later.
Yeah.
Okay, action items,
Do we have minutes to approve?
so we don't, we approve them in that
Okay.
5-minute
No,
session.
but didn't I send you minutes for that? I sent you minutes for that meeting in which we approved everything.
Oh, right. And, I didn't send that,
And we did a
sorry.
motion for me to become secretary, right? Or do we?
Are you willing to be secretary?
Yeah, I said I would.
Oh, you're
Thank you,
wonderful.
Mike.
Thank you.
I think you just got approved.
Okay, so, here, let's make it a formal vote. Would someone like to make a motion, making,
I nominate Mike as the secretary.
Seconded.
Who was
seconded,
the second?
second by Dave, any discussion?
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. All those in favor? Unanimous, okay. Okay, let's
Steve.
see, okay, so any action items for other members?
So when we meet, could we have the charge from the selectmen in front of us? Did they write up a charge in the beginning? I don't remember.
They did, yeah, I can send that.
Yeah, if we could
Send
just
it around.
have that fresh in our minds when we meet with the consultant.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Sounds good. Okay, great. Any non-agenda items? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Oops.
And just because this is not a charge that we have for the remote meeting was put on the board, agenda for Monday. And that doesn't have to go in the notes because it's not
So,
really a charge
how much
of
do you
ours,
want?
and
Yes.
I wanted to make that clear. But, and I've had so
Who
far
motioned and
3
seconded
chairs say
adjournment?
they're gonna come.
Hold on.
We all vote in favor of adjourning, right?
Well, who seconded?
Who made the motion?
I
George
motioned it,
Jordan.
and David
Third,
and
yeah.
Arlene both seconded.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Jordan motion,
Okay.
Arlene second.
Yes, we are talking about
Do you think we
remote
have,
meetings again at our
technical-
meeting on Monday. So.
but I haven't actually seen
this stuff in
action. I do a couple hours a month, on exactly this kind of stuff.
Dinner now.
Me too.
Oh, he's great.
Or
I haven't seen him for a while, but basically I started this
Let me,
stuff
just
with
turn
him,
on my-
because, we're just in.
So California bound, huh?
Well, California, yeah, I can't wait.
It's